Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about the last of the imperfectly competitive market structure, which is called oligopoly. Oligopoly is again a very general example of a market structure that we see in reality. Oligopoly, just like monopolistic competition, is very realistic in the sense that it really exists. And today we are going to look at what oligopoly market structure actually is, and what kind of equilibrium conditions should we be expecting in the oligopolistic market structure. Now, every market is characterized by some unique feature in our economics. One could argue that perfect competition is characterized by homogeneous goods. Monopoly is characterized by a single pricing, monopoly power. Monopoly is characterized by a single producer. Monopolistic competition is characterized by advertisement, and oligopoly is characterized by strategic behavior, which means that unlike all other firms, all other markets, the strategic behavior or the behavior of one firm in response to other firms becomes a central idea in oligopoly. And we're going to look at that. Okay, so just like monopolistic competition, oligopoly is somewhere between perfect competition and monopoly. In oligopoly, we will see a small number of firms, and there are some natural or legal barriers to entry of new firms. So you can see that there are some elements of monopoly there. But since we have not one firm, but or also a large number of firms, we have something in between. We will have each firm covering a large share of the market, which means that every firm in oligopoly has some kind of market power, which is kind of important. Also, since there are a few number of firms really dominating the market, the behavior of the firms are interdependent, meaning that you can think of it as like a zero-sum game where if one firm gains a market share, the other firm loses it, and vice versa. This interdependence between the firms are of utmost importance in understanding oligopoly. Since firms' behaviors are independent, there is a strong incentive for firms to collude together, make joint decisions, engage into an agreement where they are going to make joint profit maximization and price decisions. If collusion is a possibility, our small number of firms in oligopoly might work like a monopolist and can monopolize the entire market. But as you will see in a minute, that this natural intuition that collusion might be possible and beneficial in oligopoly really breaks down because firms cheat. Firms do not get into strategic behavior that benefits the opponent, but they only worry about themselves, and that is a problem. Let us therefore start with this idea of collusion, the rationality behind collusion, and the impossibility of collusion in oligopoly market structure. In collusion, firms come together, join hands, and make joint economic decisions. One of the most common name for collusion, which is an economic word, is a cartel. A cartel is a group of firms or a group of producers or even some group of individuals who come together and operate like a monopolist. When there is a cartel that is being formed in the market, the economic profit of the firms engaged into this cartel really goes up because the firm operates like a monopolist, charges price just like a monopolist would charge, and earn excess profit that a monopolist would earn. A duopoly is a example of cartel or oligopoly that regularly exists in our economy. A duopoly is where two firms operate together and dominate the entire market. When there is two firms in a market like Coke and Pepsi, again there are strong incentives for these firms to collude together. And that's why over the years, government in many countries, including USA, have made this kind of collusion or cartels illegal. Despite cartels being illegal, when you look at the market activities of some firms like Coke and Pepsi, you'd realize that they have an implicit collusion agreement between them. Reason? Which was the last time, or when was the last time you saw Coke raising their price while Pepsi didn't, or Pepsi raising their price when Coke did not? That has really never happened in my own lifetime. So I could argue that although Coke and Pepsi cannot come into a collusion according to government rules because it's illegal, they probably have some kind of understanding which really translates into a cartel-like environment. Okay. Now, if cartel is not a possibility, then our monopolist and our perfect competition will be the two extreme situations where oligopoly could be. In a more general setup, oligopoly is a market structure that lies somewhere between monopoly and perfect competition. If our oligopoly works like a monopolist, the oligopolist outcome and profit maximizing decision will be similar to similar to a monopoly case. And if our oligopoly firms engage into intense competition among each other, we could actually see outcomes which are very similar to perfect competition. Let's look at a graphical representation of the monopolistic competition and oligopoly market structure. In this market, notice that because of the way we have drawn this graph, monopoly competition is found where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. So I go up and I find market equilibrium price. Perfect competition outcome is found where marginal cost is equal to marginal is equal to demand curve, and it is also in perfect competition price is equal to marginal revenue. So this is perfect competition, this is monopoly, and one could argue that our oligopoly will lie somewhere between monopolistic competition and perfect competition outcome. So the closer the oligopoly outcome towards the monopoly outcome, we would argue that there is a inherent collusion between them. The closer the oligopoly outcome is towards the perfect competition, we would argue that there is no collusion between our firms. So it could be anything that there could be a lot of different possibilities in this case. Okay, let us now spend or look at one of the most popular and common oligopoly models in economics. They are called a duopoly model, where there are two firms and they are making decisions about how they are going to dominate the market. These firms are obviously engaged into some kind of intense competition, but they also understand that they have interdependence, right? The example is with Boeing and Airbus. And they know that if they are dominating the market, whatever Boeing produces will affect Airbus's profit level and vice versa. In order to really understand what could motivate these firms to collude or not, let's look at some of the production decisions that they can do. Imagine in the baseline scenario, our monopolists, our Boeing and Airbus have a collusion where both of them agree that they are going to produce 3 and 3 units, so they will act like a monopolist. The market total is going to be 6 quantity. The price at that level is 13, which after the calculation will enable each of these firms to make $36 million worth of profit. So that's a big deal. So it seems like if they collude and work like a monopolist, they can really earn a lot of profit. What if one of them cheats? Let us look at the numbers one more time and try to figure out why there is a temptation to cheat. If you look at the numbers, Boeing and Airbus, both of them are agreeing to produce 3 units of quantity. Both of them knows that if they can produce more than their agreed quantity, they can really raise their profit because they are the only producers in the market. So one should be clear that there is a natural tension, natural intuition for both Boeing and Airbus to lie and produce more, cheat and produce more than what they agreed to produce. Whenever the firm wants to produce more, just like monopoly, they are going to figure out whether the price that they are getting is higher than marginal cost. If it is, then they are probably going to cheat and they are going to produce more. So we are now in a situation where if we want to really understand how the duopoly is going to work, we need to think about how one of them is going to cheat. So let's imagine that Boeing is cheating. Boeing agreed that they are going to produce 3 units, but they now produce 4. The total market demand is now, market supply is 7. That really causes market equilibrium and market price to go down. We all understand that, because if production supply increases, market equilibrium goes down, which enables, after the calculation, enables Boeing to earn $40 million of profit and allow Airbus to get $30 million of profit. Now, if you pay attention to this example that we just looked at, it is clear that it is in the interest of Boeing to cheat, to deviate from their agreed quantity. What if Airbus does the same thing? What if Airbus also cheats? If Airbus cheats, they are both gonna now produce 4 and 4. Remember, both of these are cheating output. Their price is gonna go down, and their profit is going to go down from 40 to now 32 and 32. So if we want to compare, so this is a situation where both Airbus and Boeing cheated, and when they were not cheating, when both of them are producing according to their agreed upon quantity, which is this one, where they were both of them were producing 3 and 3. Their profits were 36 million and 36 million. When both of them cheat, their profit really goes down to 32. So notice that this is a classic example of a situation where it is not worthwhile to cheat. It is better to collude, but firms don't do that. Firms really try to cheat and get the maximum out of the market. And that is the nature of the problem that we face in our oligopoly. Since there is independence and there is a self-interest motive by firms, they sometimes engage into activities that really does not improve their outcome. So I think the oligopoly market structure makes a very interesting case studies for understanding market behavior. We are going to so the problem that we just looked at raises a very important question. So provided that firms cooperate or cheat, they face different kind of market outcomes. So what should they do? Right? This is a very important question. Should firms cheat or should firms collude? This question can be best answered in the context of game theory. A game theory is a branch of economics that tries to understand interaction or interdependence between market decisions and market outcomes from a strategic perspective, from a game perspective. So in the game theory, we imagine that our firms are engaging into a game. In this game, it's a game of cheating and commuting, and we want to see how that turns out in the context of a game theoretical setup. A game theoretical setup is a game theory is a tool used to analyze strategic behavior. One argues that every game there are two elements to it. If there are three elements to it. Every game has rules, every game has strategies, and every game has payoffs. A Prisoner's Dilemma is a very famous game invented by an economist named John Nash, whose life was the subject matter of this very famous movie, The Beautiful Mind. John Nash came up with an example of how how is it so difficult for economic agents to really collude with each other rather than serving their own selfish need. So Prisoner's Dilemma is a game between two prisoners that show why it is hard to cooperate even when it would be beneficial to both of the players to do so. So imagine, we are going to explain the Prisoner's Dilemma game. The game is going to be played between two players, Bob and Art. They are criminals. They were caught and they are going to jail. The problem here is that the DA office does not have sufficient information to really convict them. So what the DA office wants them wants them to confess. Is to want them to confess. And our DA office is going to play a game where we will see that the outcomes of the game or the setup of the game will force our criminals to really acknowledge that they have committed the crime. Okay. So let's first look at the rules of the game. So the rules of the game is that players cannot commute with one another. If both confess to the larger crime, it will receive a sentence of 3 years for both crimes. If one confesses and the accomplice does not, then one who confesses will receive 1 year, and the accomplice who did not confess is going to 10 years. It's a long sentence. If neither of them confesses, both will receive 2 years of life sentence. So that's a very interesting rules. The strategies here is very straightforward. Strategies of a game are all the possible outcomes, actions for each player. The strategies of the Prisoner's Dilemma are that both of them confess, deny the bank robbery, or both of them one of them confess and the other one. So the strategies is actually two: either confess or deny. I apologize. So the payoff of these two strategies are going to be of 4, right? Because one person can confess and other person might not, and that will create a distribution of payoffs. So there are basically 4 outcomes where both confesses, both deny, Art confesses, Bob denies, or Bob confesses, Art denies. 4 payoffs. And we will develop a payoff matrix that will able to tell us, what are the payoffs to each of the players in each of the actions that they take, given a possible action by the other player. So what we're looking at is called a game tree or a game table. Here, it's a 2-dimensional space. It's a matrix, and we have put the Art strategies in the vertical axis, and we have put Bob's actions or strategies in the horizontal axis. The yellow numbers tell how the payoff of Art, and the blue numbers tell us the outcome of Bob. For example, when we look at the first entry in this box, so we are focusing on this. This one says that if Bob confesses, what Art and Art confesses as well, Bob is going to get 3 years and Art is going to get 3 years. So if both of them deny, Bob is going to get 2, Art is going to get 2. If Bob confesses but Art denies, Art will get 10 years and Bob will get 1. Okay, this is very interesting. If you stare at this table, you would realize that there is something interesting things going on here. What I'm going to talk about is something called finding dominant strategy. Dominant strategy is a situation where a player will always play one strategy regardless of what the other players are going to play. So the way to find dominant strategy is to figure out each of the payoff from each of the strategies and then compare them. So for example, notice that if Bob confesses, Art looks at two options. He can either confess and get 3 years, or he deny and get 10 years. So it is important that when Bob confesses, Art will also confess. Now if Art confesses, Bob also confesses, so 3 and 3 years, or confess and confess, appears to be something that is consistent between Bob and Art. In a minute we are going to call that Nash equilibrium. Let's now think about when Bob denies. When Bob denies, Art is going to probably confess, because then Art is going to get a lower sentence. 1 is less than 2. But if Art confesses, you should see that Bob confesses as well. But if Art denies, it is better for Bob to confess, right? Because by confessing while Art is denying, Bob can really get 1 year of education, 1 year of conviction. So it seems like only when one of them confesses, the other one also confesses, appears to be the only equilibrium in this market. That appears to be the only time they agree upon. Other than that, they actually cheat on each other. And that is very interesting, because we are now going to talk about Nash equilibrium. A Nash equilibrium is an equilibrium in this market where each players take the best possible action given the action of the other player. The Nash equilibrium for Art and Bob is to confess. This is amazing, right? Notice that this idea of Bob and Art to confess is not the best outcome, right? Let's go back to the table one more time. If Bob and Art both denied, they could have got 2 years and 2 years. But instead of that, as a result of their incentive to cheat, both of them confesses and gets a higher sentence. I think that this really summarizes the idea that in case of game theory, there is a conflict of interest between between the one that is beneficial to us and the one that is beneficial to the entire economy or to the entire game. Okay. So what we just looked at was an example of two firms or two persons playing a game. We can also have the similar kind of game in a market setup where we are going to call that a duopolis dilemma. You can set the game in the same game between Boeing and Airbus in the same way, and think of it as a game, right? First of all, you can think about each firms having two strategies, either produce 3 or 4 units. 3 unit is under collusion, 4 unit is when they cheat. So therefore we will have 4 different outcomes where both of the firms can either produce 3 every week. One of them could produce 4, the other one could produce 3, or you can have or both of them produce 4 units, right? So there are actually 4 outcomes in this case. So we can similarly take those numbers that we calculated before, put them into a matrix context, and then you can see that it is easier to understand the outcome of this game by looking at this matrix. For example, notice that when Airbus is producing 4 units per week, it is best for Boeing to produce 4 units per week as well, because that's how Boeing can maximize their profit, because 32 is greater than 30. When Airbus wants to produce 3 units per week, Boeing wants to produce the Boeing 3 units per week. Boeing probably wants to produce 4 units per week, because that maximizes profit. Again, when Boeing wants to produce 4 units per week, Airbus wants to produce 4 units per week. When Boeing wants to produce 3 units per week, Boeing probably wants to produce 4 units per week, right? So you can see that the only place where both of them agrees is when both of them produce 4 units per week and both of them get $32 million worth of profit. You should notice that if both of them just stayed with their original monopolistic original contract, where both of them could act like a monopolist, they could both produce 3 units and their profit would have been higher to 36 million. But the unfortunate outcome is that they don't really trust each other, so both of them try to cheat. Both of them produced a quantity more than what they agreed upon, and both of them ends up having a lower profit. Okay, so the conclusion that we should get from this is that collusion is profitable. Collusion can really improve the profit opportunities for firms like Airbus. It can lead to desirable, jail sentences for criminals and players. But at the end of the day, collusion is very difficult to achieve. The duopoly's dilemma really explains why it is difficult for the firm to collude and achieve the maximum monopoly profit, because they don't really trust each other. So what the example just showed us is that collusion is profitable, but collusion is very difficult to achieve. So although collusion is illegal for most of the markets around the world, even if it was legal, probably it would not have been possible to actually see realistic collusion or cartels in real market. Now, when people talk about collusion or cartel, they argue that collusion or cartel does not really have to be explicit like the ones that we just looked at, where there is a given agreement between the parties that they are going to follow a certain strategy, a certain agreed upon strategy. They always talk about international organizations like OPEC, which is an organization set up by most of the major oil producing countries in the world, and they argue that although these producers do not have any explicit agreement as how much production that they are going to make or how they are going to control the market price, they are indeed and essentially working under a cartel, and therefore they are monopolizing the market. Okay, you can look at the same kind of duopolistic game example in the context of advertisement and research, where there could be two firms like Coke and Pepsi, or Procter and Gamble and Kimberly-Clark, where how much they advertise really depend on how much their competitor is willing to advertise. And you can look at the game in the same flavor of the prisoner's dilemma game, where in this case, in terms of advertisement, the outcome of each of the strategies are given. You should see clearly that what will happen is that if Pepsi advertises, Coke will also advertise, but if Pepsi does not advertise, Coke will advertise just to beat the beat Pepsi in the market. So the only Nash equilibrium is going to be where both firms advertise and earn a $20 million worth of profit. Notice that if they could collide and they decided that they don't want to advertise, both of them have to decide that they don't want to advertise, they could actually get a higher profit. Unfortunately, they cannot reach that, because anytime one of them deviates from not advertising, the other one really jumps in and starts advertising, hoping that they could actually get the entire market, which they cannot. So I think these examples give you a very interesting examples of realistic market situations where collusion is not possible. Okay, there is also a game of research and development game between Procter & Gamble and Kimberly-Clark. You can see the same idea being there, right? So if both of them do research and development, they are going to be in a situation. So let's imagine Kimberly-Clark does R&D. So it's obviously that Procter & Gamble will also R&D. And if Procter & Gamble R&Ds, it seems like Kimberly-Clark is also doing R&D. So both of them doing R&D and R&D makes sense. But if both of them decided that they would not R&D, spend money on research and development, they could have earned a much larger profit, which doesn't happen, because anytime one of them deviates from their agreed upon decision or cheats, the other one follows a different strategy and the game falls apart. So in this kind of duopolistic game, the idea of the prisoner's dilemma is extremely powerful, in the sense that we see the same problem over and over again. Okay. So the last game that we're going to look at is an idea that games can be played over a repeated period of time. The idea behind that, and I'm just going to highlight that, you can read that on your own, is that sometimes over time, when firms repeat their experience, so it's not a game that is just played once and everything stops, they game on a sequential basis. And in that case, if you make one strategy today and then try to deviate from that strategy in the next period, you could be punished. So in repeated games, there could be some kind of penalty associated with you cheating on your competitors, and that could really dramatically change the outcomes. I hope that you will read that on your own. And that is sort of where we want to left off. The last point that we want to just touch on is, again, similar to monopoly. The question is whether oligopoly is efficient or not. We see clearly that in oligopoly, price is greater than marginal cost, because the equilibrium conditions look very similar. So the quantity that oligopoly produces is less than the perfect competition output, where price was equal to marginal cost. So oligopoly suffers from the same source and type of inefficiency as monopoly. Oligopoly suffers from the same source and type of inefficiency. Oligopoly could also suffer from the same set of inefficiency coming from monopolistic competition, in the sense that it could also lead to underproduction, and that could lead to a further inefficiency in the market. So just like monopoly, oligopoly would also require a lot of government regulations to seek remedial measures in the market. Government regularly intervenes into these markets to break down oligopoly, just like they do for monopoly. Examples like antitrust laws, examples like regulations are regularly played out in trying to improve the market outcomes under oligopoly. But in general terms, oligopoly is also inefficient because it leads to dead weight loss. So thank you very much. I hope that this lecture was useful. If you have any question, please get in touch with me.